Thank you very much for coming. And I'm going to be going over a lot of stuff today. So I'm going to be moving fairly quickly, but hopefully there'll be time for questions at the end. I'm planning on there to be questions, so I really hope there are. Just going to stop this for 1 second just to get rid of a thing here that's screwing me up. There we go. So I'm just going to dive right in. This is an overview of what we're going to be talking about. There's a lot of stuff I said in the next hour and a half. We're going to start looking at the first idea of great is the enemy of good. Then we're going to dive into sort of the basics of your smartphone, what you should be paying attention to, how to sort of respect it. Then we're going to talk a little bit about story, because if you don't understand what kind of story you're gathering, you can't shoot video very quickly because you're just going to be shooting everything. We're going to talk a little bit about location and why paying attention to lighting and sound and stuff is really important. How to shoot intelligent B-roll. And I'll talk about that in more detail, how to shoot the main footage. And we're going to be talking about chips and gears there. And next, there we go. Then footage quality and tips and tricks for that, recording audio, a little bit about lighting, post-production workflow, publishing your work, where and why, archiving it, and streamlining approvals, which is super important, as we'll get into, and then sort of a summary, and then hopefully your questions. So let's dive right in. So first of all, I want to talk about this idea of great as the enemy of good. A lot of people, I think, in organizations like yours might hire external folks to shoot really good videos, like maybe once a year for your AGM or some special event. And that's great. And a lot of folks will do really good work that way. But what you're going to get is expensive in terms of money and expensive in terms of time, and not very frequent. And then maybe you'll shoot some of your own stuff with your smartphone, and every now and then you'll get something that's good, good quality. But very often, if you don't know how to use your smartphone to shoot video, you're going to get a lot of poor quality stuff. And frankly, I see that coming out of rallies, a lot of poor quality video, and we'll talk, and I'll show you a couple of examples of that. And so the idea of this seminar is to help you go from this to the idea of creating more good stuff more frequently. And the reason that that's important is because if you use a smartphone, which all sorts of people have in your organization, you can turn video into something that's not just a 1 or 2 time a year kind of thing, but something that is a scalable and diffuse commodity. And by scalable, I mean that a lot of people in your organization can do it. And diffuse means because a lot of people can do it, they can all participate, rather than what happens sometimes, I think, in organizations is somebody will say, oh, yeah, we need to do video. You get a Sony a6600 camera, and you get it, and you start reading the manual, and you have no idea what to do with it. And then it sits in the corner, and nobody uses it. And even if it did get used, one person uses it, and nobody else in your organization can really contribute. And you end up wasting thousands of dollars rather than just using the tool that you have in your hand, right? So let's talk a little bit about the basics of the camera you have in your hand, which is your smartphone. A lot of people, because smartphones are so small, a lot of people tend to use them as if they were point and shoot cameras, and they take selfies with them, or they just hold them at a distance and you know, at arm's length, and wiggle them around and stuff, and just shoot really bad video and really bad photographs, when in fact the camera is capable of much more than that, right? So I just want to spend a little time talking about respecting your smartphone. And that means to get to know it, know your lenses. Find your example. If this was your smartphone that you used, here's a couple of questions. You know, it's got lenses on the back, or this one's got 3 lenses. So which lens are you shooting with? When you shoot video, which one of those lenses is it that you're actually shooting with? You're using a microphone. Well, this phone camera has 4 microphones. So where is the microphone? Is it in the front? Is it in the back? Is it in the bottom? Is it at the side? Like, if you don't know where those things are on your smartphone, you're going to end up shooting poorer quality video and with poorer quality audio, just because you didn't sort of read the manual about what lens you're shooting with and why you're shooting with a particular lens. Are you shooting with the telephoto or the normal lens, the wide angle lens? Are you shooting in macro? Are you shooting in cinematographic mode, portrait mode? What is it that you're doing with this phone that is capable of so much stuff? You need to sort of respect that technology and learn about it so that you just don't feel befuddled by it and feel threatened by it, or just feel stupid using it, or blaming yourself when something goes wrong, when in fact it's very solvable if you just take the time to sort of respect the technology. So here's one of the first things you can do is, and it seems like a silly thing, but it's really important, is clean your lens, right? Like a lot of people will take their phone out of their pocket and just smear their finger over it. And you can see from this photograph that in those highlights in the photograph, you can see those diagonal lines. That's caused because the lens has some oil on it from somebody's fingerprints, or, just some gum in your pocket along with your phone or whatever. And what that really means is every pixel in that image, all of that image is smeared. You can see it in the highlights, but it's just degrading the quality, the color rendition, the resolution of the image is completely degraded simply because you didn't clean your lens. So if you're going to an event and you're going to be shooting video, take a microfiber cloth, or even just wipe it on your jacket or something, but try to get that oil off the lens. Like, keep your lens clean, and especially don't put your phone in a pocket with a bunch of Kleenex, because then you'll just get dust all over it. And that's really bad, especially if you're in contrasting lighting situations. You'll just get all sorts of glare on it, right? So I also wanted to highlight that, all digital cameras, whether they're DSLRs or smartphones, have a sensor inside them. And by and large, the size of the sensor really is related to quality. The bigger the sensor, generally, the better the quality in terms of light gathering, in terms of resolution, in terms of color fidelity, all sorts of stuff. And so you can see here that the little blue square down there at the left-hand side of that diagram is sort of an average smartphone. This is a most recent iPhone 14 chip size, a sensor that actually the light hits. And you can see relative to a full frame camera, it's very teeny tiny. So you've got to appreciate the limitations of that, which means that it's not great at gathering a lot of light. It's not going to resolve images as sharply as a full frame camera. However, on the other hand, there are advantages to smartphones. And what smartphones make up for in physics, a lack of ability in just physics, the physical size of the sensor and the size of the lenses, they make up for in computational power. So a lot of contemporary smartphones do a thing called computational photography. So with traditional photography, you have light hitting a chemical bath that's on top of a substrate, some plastic substrate or polycarbonate substrate in a film camera. And you're capturing a 60th of a second or 1/250th of a second. And you're capturing that moment, that very moment in time. With a digital camera, what's really happening, and sometimes with video, certainly with stills, is that the camera is capturing multiple images over a very, very short period of time, and then applying a lot of computational machine learning to that image to get the best of each of those images. And also, it processes skin differently from hair, differently from grass, differently from sky, differently from concrete. And so you end up with an image that is the best of all possible images taken in those very four slices of time that it captures. And so it has tremendous ability to capture dynamic range, particularly that's all the stuff from the lightest part of this image to the darkest part of the image, and even color fidelity. It makes up for a lot, but you still have to respect it. There's certain things it can't do. It's not very good in low light, especially shooting video. So it's just important I want to point this out because it's good to know what your camera is good at and what it's not good at, because it allows you to shoot better stuff. So one of the things that you need to pay attention to is what mode your camera is shooting in. With a contemporary smartphone, there's a variety of modes. Like, for example, portrait mode. On an iPhone or Android phone, if you're taking stills, portrait mode sort of softens the background. In video, it creates, if you shoot in cinematographic mode, it has the same effect. So here, for example, this is Lucia from the Green Party at a rally recently, and you'll notice the background is out of focus. And that's a Japanese word called bokeh is what it's described as, is this ability of a camera to produce an image that's sharp in the foreground and blurry in the background. And the reason that that's good is because it separates the background from the foreground. And that's really important, especially when you're shooting interviews with people. You don't want necessarily the background to be as sharp as the people because it's too distracting. So if you didn't know that your camera could shoot that, you'd be shooting this and everything would be sharp. And that's sort of the fate of images out of a point and shoot cameras, that everything tends to be sharp. And really, in a lot of cases, shooting video, especially, as I said, with interviews and stuff, you don't want the background to be sharp. You want it to be softer because you want to differentiate the foreground from the background. We'll talk more about foreground and background differentiation later on. Your phone can also shoot slow motion. It can shoot in many of the contemporary smartphones can shoot in macro mode. And that's a little shot of like bubble tea there in a macro shot with a phone. You know, it's tremendous capability. It can also do things like stabilization. So for example, this is a video that I shot looking like an idiot on Bay Street in Hamilton, running behind a scooter. And keep in mind, I'm actually running, holding my phone. And let's just watch the footage. So that's not perfect, but given the fact that I was running and looking goofy doing it, it's pretty amazing that the camera can actually stabilize that much. And we're going to talk more about stabilization and why stabilization is so important in video shortly. And we're also going to be talking coming up about lighting and audio and recording good audio and lighting subjects well. And as I said, stabilizing. But before we go into that, I want to spend some time talking about something that I think is really important when you're thinking about shooting video, whether it's smartphones or anything, or even just generally thinking about how you're going to tell your story. And that's that's what I want to talk about is story. So right off the top, if you want to shoot quick video well, and that's what this seminar is about. And let me pause for a sec just to reemphasize that this webinar is helping you hopefully record quick video. So video, not that you can turn around in 2 weeks or 2 days, but video that you can turn around in 3 hours. Like some of you may have watched some of the videos I've shot of the rallies over the past couple of months. And almost all of them I got up on YouTube within 3 hours of the event. So that's what this is about, is shooting video quickly with a good story behind it, in a way that is compelling and engaging and enhances the reach of your message. So one of the first things you want to do is do good research to understand what the issues are and where the issue is in time. And we'll talk about that in a minute, like, you know, the stop the sprawl and stop tall buildings and all that stuff. That all moves along a timeline, and different issues become important and different thrusts of a campaign become important over time. And if you don't know those touch points and where the ball's going, it's difficult to sort of get there and make sure your message works for the time you're doing. So it's really important to do your research, right? It's really important to take really good notes. And I use a tool called Craft to sort of organize all my notes and clippings and everything. I'm also using another tool called Obsidian these days, which I really like. And I also brainstorm questions on my iPad, just sort of as a mind map. And I do that ahead of time so that I can think through what's the actual story I want to tell here with this, you know. And one of the things that leads to a good tale is, what is the story you want to tell? What's the issue? What is the way you want to convey it? And one of the big questions is, you know, whose story is it? So if it was Star Wars, it's, you know, it's Luke Skywalker's story. But if it's an issue, you want to try to find people who personify that issue, for whom their journey through troubled time to some kind of resolution reflects the issue and gives people a human anchor, a human hook to hang on to what could be a systemic problem or a statistical problem, none of which actually resonates with people. Numbers don't move hearts and minds, right? You can't sort of think somebody out of a place they didn't think themselves into, right? You have to appeal to their humanity, right? And you want to think about what does your audience need to know and when? Like, is this the right time to tell this story? Should I wait a week? Should I have done it a week ago and now I've missed my opportunity? What do you want people to learn? So if somebody is watching your video that's 2 or 3 minutes long, great. What is the main message you want to deliver? And what would you like them to do, given that they've got that message? Like, you want people to do a 5-minute activism thing, or a 10-minute activism, or a 5-second activism. Click here and send a letter off to Lumsden or whatever. You also want to think about, is it news they can use? Is it something that they can actually apply in their real life? Is it something that they could think, yeah, I could do that. I could help with this. And is it something they could do right now? Right. So you want to do all of this because you want to get stories that get attention. So you really want to think about addressing a current issue. As I said, if you're doing a series of videos about rallies, and one rally after another has a rhythm, has a sameness to them, but you also have to look at the differentiation. Like, what's different from last time? What could I do this time that I didn't do last time? So I did a little video called Hey Doug Ford, where I asked people to say, hey Doug Ford, hands off the green belt, all that stuff. And then that was just one hook, one way to sort of show what was going on at the rally. And then I changed it up the next time, right? And you want to keep your video moving and keep it tight. You just don't want to have one person sort of doing a monologue. You want a bunch of people, a bunch of human reactions, especially in rallies, where you want to say, these aren't just politicians coming out and doing talking points. These are actual human beings who have done the work and have experienced the hardship and have taken the time to come out here and say something that's really meaningful and articulate. And it's really important, I think, that you're not talking to an echo chamber. I see a lot of folks talking at rallies, and God love them for doing it, but the messages that they're putting out are to an echo chamber. They're just talking to the people that are there. And so it doesn't really resonate beyond that circle. So shooting video of that isn't that helpful, because people outside that circle aren't really going to resonate with it, because their hearts and minds aren't as cleaved to that idea or those issues as the people in that circle are, right? So it's really important to try to think of how you're going to communicate with people beyond just the people that are there, if video is being shot. And you want to make your points clear and concise. I see people at rallies who are reading from smartphones. So 2 problems there. 1, they're reading from a smartphone, but not engaging with the audience. 2, their heads are down. So terrible video, right? So don't do that. Like, don't read a 10-minute speech that you wrote on your smartphone the night before. Like, that's terrible video, right? And you want to introduce some humor. And I really think, particularly on the left, I think, and I've been involved with the left for a long time, we're sort of allergic to humor, right? And then if you don't introduce something fun, like funny signs or that kind of stuff, then you just become sort of the drudge at the cocktail party that nobody wants to talk to, right? Because you're never any fun. You're just really super serious. And I know you're dealing with serious issues, but you have to deal with them sometimes in a humorous way so that you get people's attention, right? So I just want to talk a little bit about locations. It's less important if you're talking about rallies, but certainly if you're doing some kind of interviews with folks. So one of the things that you want to do if you want to shoot good video quickly is make sure that your lighting is good and that you're in the right place at the right time. So for example, on this slide, you can see I did a video about the Strathcona Market, which is just down the street from where I live on Ray Street in Hamilton. And you can see this young woman is leaving the market. Well, the only way that shot would have worked if I shot it in the afternoon, because the light isn't available that way in the morning. It's the wrong lighting for that. It would be in shadow. And the same with the guy named Mackenzie there on the right. The lighting there is really important, because I sat him, and I'll show you this more in detail later, in front of a window. And so the lighting is really good on him, and there's lighting in the background. And you'll notice that the lighting on Mackenzie is it's called a color temperature, slightly bluer, a little cooler than the background. And this is another way to differentiate your background from the foreground. So I talked about the background being able to focus being really important, because you want the foreground sharp. But you can also differentiate the foreground from the background. Here, Mackenzie and the background are sharp, but Mackenzie is a slightly different color temperature and a little bit brighter than the background. So he pulls out of the background a little bit. So that's really important. And if you didn't scout, if I hadn't scouted that location, I wouldn't know, oh, there's a window there, those are products behind him. I can put him on a bench there. That will work out really well, right? And you want to listen to sound, so if there's a lot of ambient sound, particularly if there's music, and I'll talk about music later on, you really be mindful of that because it can be very distracting and sometimes can actually ruin your video. And pay attention to the time of day, right? Like if you want to shoot something, if there's food prep going on at a co-op that you're shooting or something, you got to be there when the food prep's taking place. So you got to sort of do all your research on that. Just a quick side note, there's a really good app called Photo Pills that I think is also available on the Android platform that allows you to put in a time of day and the location. It will show you where the sun's going to be. So if you need to sort of think through if okay, I want to shoot this farmer in his field, what's the light going to be like if I have him facing his barn, which is to the east of where he's going to be. You can put in, Bancroft or wherever you're going to be and figure out where the light's going to be and say, okay, I got to be there at 11:30. Okay. So it's a pretty interesting piece of software. So let's talk a little bit about B-roll. For those of you who don't know, B-roll is the stuff that you cut away to when somebody's talking, like if there's a main interview and you cut to something that they've talked about, that's called B-roll. So all of these things are B-roll from rallies. So that's all stuff that you would shoot as extra to add additional information. So the idea for shooting B-roll for very quick video is to shoot just enough, not too little and not too much. So this is on the right-hand side there. That's a list of B-roll I shot for one of the rallies, and there's probably actually about 50 little clips that I shot. So it helps you tell your stories in pictures, right? So if somebody's talking about something, you can show them, you can show the crowd so people get a sense of what the scene was like. So you're really being an audience or a witness for your audience, that you were there. I was there. This is what I saw. That's sort of the intent of it, to say I was at this rally. Here's the things I saw. I want to share them with you, right? So it's really helpful, right? It adds value to your video. So it's just not a talking head. It's actually additional information that sets the context, sets the scene, gives you a sense of the energy and the number of people, the colors, the sounds, everything, right? It allows you to cut your interview. So this is a really important point. So if I was interviewing somebody and this happened recently at one of the rallies, somebody was actually speaking to the crowd and fumbled over a word. Well, and it was, it detracted from the speech and stuff. So what I did is I cut the video of her talking and cut that word out, that fumble out. Well, if you look at the video, then there would be a jump from where just before she made the stumble to after, when she recovered, right? But I put B-roll over top of it. And so you never know that there was actually a stumble in the speaking there, because I covered it over with B-roll, right? Some of the B-roll you can shoot ahead of time. So if I'm at a rally and I know I'm going to be interviewing people, I will shoot some of the crowd scenes ahead of time. Some I'll shoot after, because somebody might mention something that I think, oh, geez, I didn't get a shot of that. I should go get a shot of that. And so you have to do it afterwards. So you have to keep it in your head while you're listening. And some you can only go shoot at certain times a day. Like if you wanted to shoot a shot of a field, if somebody was saying this field's going to turn into condominiums, then you want to get there when at early morning light or evening light, some nice lighting on it, right? And you can use stills as B-roll. So stills, if you shoot something like a building that's not going to move and has no intention of moving, you can actually slowly zoom in on that. It's called the Ken Burns effect. Slowly zoom in on that still and use it as B-roll, and it looks really good. You want to keep your B-roll really short because you're meant to just cut away to it. And you want to keep it steady, and we'll talk about that in a little while. And often, depending on the B-roll you're shooting, you can ignore audio because you're probably going to kill the audio because you're actually having somebody speaking, so you don't want the audio to interrupt them. Other times you don't. And you don't log footage. Again, if you're shooting for this kind of video, if you're shooting a documentary that you weren't going to edit for another year or so or months later, sure, log footage, which means you go through all your footage, you write down who's in the shot, what people said, maybe even transcribe it, make really good notes on all the footage, index it, all of that stuff. You don't have time for that. This is stuff you're turning around in 3 hours, right? So you just try to keep in your head the B-roll you shot, and you just get used to this over time, that you think, I'm going to shoot this, and this. I need this. I'm not going to bother with that. And then when you get home, you've got a limited number of B-roll clips to use. Again, just not too many, not too few, just the right amount. And that takes practice, but it really speeds things up. So this is just sort of a little diagram of what B-roll looks like. It's the stuff that you jump to. The purple would be main content, so that would be cutting to those things in the B-roll, and your main content sits underneath there. All right. So too much B-roll becomes too unmanageable, and too little limits your flexibility. So again, you just want to find that sweet spot between the things. And then, wrong B-roll is unusable. Like if you've got stuff that's too jerky or badly lit or anything, you just wasted your time. So I just want to talk a little bit about intelligent B-roll from the point of view of you being, let's assume you're one person with one smartphone. So here's a great example. So if you saw me at this rally that was at Lumsden's office, you would see that I was there hand holding and I'll show you the rig I used in a minute, shooting video of, I think it's Lily is her name, speaking. But in the video, the B-roll cuts to people reacting to Lily, right? Reacting to the speech. Well, if you think about it, you think, well, Wayne, how did you do that? Because you were shooting Lily. Like, where did that footage come from? Well, I shot it just prior to Lily speaking, right? And found stuff that would work in reaction to stuff that she was saying, in terms of, like, there was this sort of generic cheering that was happening and stuff. So if you sort of plan ahead, you can looks like you're in more than one place at a time, right? That it's a bit of an artifice, but it creates the reality of what that situation was, that Lily was speaking, people were responding. And part of that shooting that intelligent B-roll means sometimes, you have to be really tough, right? So if somebody is, and I'll be honest here, if somebody is speaking, and I think this is, somebody's reading from their smartphone or reading from a clipboard and their head's down, I'm thinking, I am not shooting this. I'm shooting B-roll for this one because this is really bad, right? So which is bad for the organization because you don't want those kinds of things, but frankly, it happens, and then, it gives me the opportunity to shoot the B-roll, right? If you shoot B-roll, all your footage, you want to store it wisely, right? And I mentioned about not logging it if you're shooting it, but you want to back it up, right? You want to you've got footage on your phone. Maybe you don't have a lot of storage on your phone. So you want to get it off your phone quickly, like transfer it via AirDrop or, cable or whatever you want to do to your computer, then back it up off your computer. So now put it also on an external hard drive or on an iCloud storage or whatever. Then you've got 2 copies of it. So now you're safe. You've got 2 copies apart from the one that's on your phone. Now you can get it off your phone. Now you can clean it off your phone, get ready for next time. You don't have to clog your phone up, but make sure you get it to your computer and then back it up off your computer, then take it off your phone. Then you're safe, right? So now I just want to talk about shooting main footage. Just let me go back there for a second. So what we're going to talk about now is really practical stuff in terms of how to shoot good footage. And this is the problem I see with a lot of rallies, is that the footage that's coming out of them isn't good, and it could be good if you just take a few steps to improve it. So this again is Lucia, and this is some of the ways that you can keep stuff steady. So I really encourage you to get really good equipment. Sometimes you can do it really inexpensively. Sometimes you need to spend a bit of money. And I put together a gear sheet that will be sent around to you after this seminar. So you don't have to make notes on all of this stuff that I'm going to talk about. And there's other gear you can buy. This is the stuff I like. And I'm giving you the model numbers just in case you think, yeah, I like that too. You don't need to buy this. but this is a video tripod, and the difference between a video tripod and a still photography tripod is the video tripod has a sort of a fluid head. It makes it very easy to pan and tilt without the camera being jerky. Like if you just use a photo tripod, a cheap, $29 Amazon basic photo tripod, it will just stick and it'll be terrible if you want to try to pan. So it's worthwhile getting a tripod and keeping your camera steady. It doesn't have to be a tripod. I often run and gun, and I'll show you that again in a minute. But if you're going to invest in a tripod, get a good one. And it's not that expensive relative to if you had spent your money on a high-end DSLR that sits in the corner. But it's really important. And you want to use it for tripod. As I said, it's smooth locking. And don't cheap out on the tripod. Like it's worth spending the money on a really good tripod. There's other stuff you can do inexpensively, and I'll show you that, but getting a good tripod is super important, right? So you might think, well, how do I get the camera onto the tripod? Well, this is the rig that I use. This is it's going to hopefully come into focus in a second here. Come on, little guy, you can do it. There we go. So this is the rig that I use, and it has a thing called a glyph. And I'll just show you how this works. I'm just going to take the bottom off here. So this actually will go into the tripod mount, and I can put my phone right into here. So I can just slip it open here and drop the camera right into there. So it just snaps in there. And then on top of that, I can put my microphone and my lighting equipment that mounts on there. And I'll show you that in more detail in a second. But it's really nice rig to use. So there's the glyph, and it's really an inexpensive piece of software or hardware that makes it really easy to snap your phone into a tripod or a handheld mount. And there's other ones. I really like this one because it allows you to mount a microphone and a light on the sides of it as well. And this is what it looks like when you're, sorry, just let me go back here a second. When you're shooting the main footage with a handheld object. So this is the glyph that I'm using now, and I'm going to put mine back together here and show you in person. But that's the rig that I use to shoot a lot of the video that I've been doing is with the glyph. So I'm just going to, yeah, there we go. So this is it in person there, and that's the light down here and the microphone here, and we'll talk more about both of those in a little bit, but that's sort of how the rig works, and then it's handheld, so it's really easy to move around and run and gun with. And all of the pieces that allow you to attach the microphone and the light are from a company called Small Rig. Again, other companies make them, you can get them on Amazon, but they're really easy and inexpensive to get. They're like $12 each. And then you can put together a rig that makes it very easy for you to do what's called running and gunning. And I sort of can't stress enough how important it is to have good lighting and particularly good audio. And if you want to shoot really good footage with your smartphone, you have to use an external microphone. And it's a good idea to use an external light. And I'll explain why in a minute. So it really makes it easy to attach stuff. So again, this is the rig here with the microphone and the camera and the smartphone and the lighting attached, right? So there's other options to smooth, reliable shooting. You can do all sorts of other kinds of things like rigs. This is called a rig, and it allows you to mount the camera and the light and even lenses if you want to on it. And again, these are from companies like Small Rig and B-Script, and they're really handy to shoot with. And you can also get smaller tripods that you can put on a tabletop and stuff. So there's all sorts of options that you have for shooting and stabilizing. You can also fix a little bit of stabilization in post-production in software like iMovie or Final Cut Pro. You can stabilize shaky video. It crops in a little bit on the image and stabilizes. It's never a good idea to depend on post-production to fix your mistakes that you should have corrected when you're in the field, right? You can do it. It's not as good. It's going to degrade the quality. and it's not an excuse for keeping your camera steady and shooting good footage to begin with, right? So you really don't want to depend on it. You just really don't. So I want to talk about shooting the main subject and sort of interrelating with people as subjects, right? So you want to generally, particularly, sometimes if I was shooting a rally, I just might say, hey, I'm shooting some video for the rally and I'm going to be passing it on to the Save the Sprawl folks. Could you help me out here? I'd like you to say, hey, Doug Ford, whatever you want to say to Doug Ford if he was right in front of you, right? And people are very accommodating, but you just want to try to make people relax and stuff. And for sort of run and gunning stuff, there's not a lot of time to do that. So one of the key things is, and this is super important, is don't be nervous yourself, right? If you're nervous yourself, you will project that like you are projecting light out of your eyes, right? Like you just radiate nervousness and you make the people around you nervous, right? You have to be confident, a sense of fun, a sense of energy, so that people play that back for you, right? So you got to get sort of confident with that, right? You also want to tell people where to look sometimes, because especially with a smartphone with 3 lenses or 4 lenses and you're there, like what am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to look at? And that confuses people and it makes it difficult for them to have an eye contact with the camera, like I'm trying to do right now, right? That you want to have that human interaction of I'm actually looking at you, I'm talking to you, I'm saying, hey, Doug Ford, hands off the green belt, and I'm looking right out at the camera, right? And you want to sort of generally discuss what you want. Sometimes people might think, I say, hey, would you help me with this? I'm doing this Hey Doug Ford thing, for example. They said, I'm sure. Can I think about it for a minute? Yeah, great. I'll come back in a minute. And then I come back and you ready? Yeah. Okay, let's go. Right. And it's just fun. Again, it's just letting people be comfortable. Sometimes it's really important to tell people how long the video is, to say, look, I'm just shooting this video. It's going to be 3 minutes long. I'm talking to 10 people. So if you could just, really quickly tell me what really bugs you about the way Donna Skelly is treating her constituents, right? Then you've set the stage and you said, you don't have to invest a lot. You don't have to deliver a monologue. You don't have to think a whole bunch about it. Just speak from your heart and speak briefly, right? And encourage short answers, because with short videos, you don't have time for people to go on for a great deal of time. And you can, politely ask people to redo it, say, hey, what, that was really great. You made some really good points there. Could you maybe do that in about half the time? Could we try that again? Right. And most times people are, because they don't want to look stupid. They don't want to not be helpful. So you just want to say, look, I'm trying to make you look the best as possible. I'm trying to make an effective video. That would be super helpful. And people are very accommodating. And again, your job is to make people look good, right? Unless you're doing some kind of investigative piece, in which case it's not. But generally, for these kinds of videos, you want people to look good and sound articulate. You don't want people to think, oh, these people at rallies are morons, right? You want people to think, hey, these people are articulate and have actually thought about the issues, right? And if you're doing an interview like this one I did with the folks at Strathcona Market, you just really want to ask just 2 or 3 key questions, not a whole bunch of questions, just questions that you think people would really like to know. Like, for example, with the Strathcona Market story, Justin, the guy that started it, he started it just after another co-op called the Mustard Seed went out of business in the same location. And he started the Strathcona Market right at the beginning of the pandemic. So the obvious question is, like, whoa, Justin, like, why? What were you thinking that you started this in the same place another place went down the tubes right at the beginning of COVID? Like, what was your thinking there? What made you think that would work really well? Because that's an obvious question that people would have. And that starts the interview. And that's a really good way for people to be engaged. That this is as I mentioned earlier, like with Luke Skywalker, this is a hero journey. This is somebody who was up against adversity and succeeded. And how did that happen? And what can people learn from that are interested in starting a co-op? All of that stuff is really good. And you also want to, when you're doing those kind of interviews, you want to listen to potential follow-up questions. Like if somebody mentions something that didn't show up in your research and you think, whoa, I did not know that. Like that's, whoop, we're going down this road for a little while because that's super interesting, right? You got to listen. Like you just don't want to just follow a script mindlessly, right? You want to listen for B-roll needs. So if Justin mentioned certain suppliers that are in the story, you want to, okay, I got to shoot that and that and that. I got to keep that in mind. And you hold that in your head, right? You want to listen for jargon. So if Justin said, he didn't, but if Justin said, well, we really are interested in organic food and the OMGC guidelines really show us, and I think, what OMGC guidelines? Or either that might get cut out because it's too jargony, or you need to say, hey, could you just explain what that OMGC, I just made that up, but or whatever means, right? If there's errors of fact, like if you've done your research and Justin had said something that was just a mistake, like if he said, our store's on Dundurn Avenue when it's on York Boulevard because he was a bit nervous, you could say, Justin, could we redo that because you're on York Boulevard, right? Oh yeah, that's correct, right? And so you can fix that. And if there's background noise, you really want to, if something all of a sudden somebody dropped a 10-pound bag of flour on the floor while he was speaking, you've got to say, okay, sorry, we got to do that again because we just had that noise, right? And don't be afraid to ask for redos, as I said, right? So now I want to get into another sort of technical aspect of shooting footage, but a super important one. So it's going to be a little bit nerdy for a couple of slides, but for a good reason. So a lot of people wonder what quality of video they should shoot at. Your phone can shoot really low quality video, very low resolution, or very high quality. Some phones can shoot up to like 4, sometimes 8K video, which is very high resolution. So this is a clip from YouTube, and it is an older clip at what's called 1080p, which is a sample rate or a resolution that's sort of standard for YouTube. A lot of YouTube is shot in 1080p. And so that's sort of the standard. That's what's out there now. So you would think, oh, I guess I should shoot my video at 1080p because it's not super high resolution, but it's pretty high resolution, and it will take less room on the camera, and it will take less time to move over to my computer. So that's what I should do, right, Wayne? It's 1080p, I shoot 1080p. No, you shoot at, I suggest you shoot at 4K, which is sort of 4 times the resolution, and here's why. So here is 1080p resolution. This is what 4K resolution looks like. And the advantage of shooting 4K is that it gives you the ability in post-production to zoom in twice, 2 times zoom, without any degradation in quality to a 1080p video, because the video is going to be going out 1080p. You've got all sorts of resolution at 4K. So that gives you the ability to crop in. And that can be super helpful, right? And you couldn't do that if you didn't shoot in 4K. So here's an example. So here is a woman that I shot at a rally. And this is, I shot it in 4K video, and you can see the crop there. So if I shot it in 4K, I could come in 2 times in post-production, which is exactly what I did. So here is the video in 4K. Here's it cropped to 1080p. Now this, when I said this is what I did, I mean in this example, I would never crop this tight, but what you can do, and it's super useful, you'll see it in some of the videos I did at the rally, is that if someone is speaking and is speaking over, say, 10, 15 seconds, I will slowly zoom in post-production a little bit, or maybe more than a little bit sometimes, because it brings you closer to them. And the closer, the old adage is if you like somebody at 10 feet, you're really going to like them at 1 foot. And if you hate somebody at 10 feet, you're really going to hate them at 1 foot, right? That the closer you get, the more stronger the emotional connection is with a person. So I'm exaggerating here, but in the videos that I've shot, I just come in just a little bit because it just brings you in closer as somebody is delivering their message. So here's an example. This is the same footage. The first time is just at 4K, and then the second time I zoom in. Again, exaggerated for effect.
Hey, Doug Ford, hands off the green belt. That was your promise originally. Hey, Doug Ford, hands off the green belt. That was your promise originally.
Right? Same footage, but because I shot in 4K, I can now get that image, which is on the right-hand side, in really good resolution at 1080p. because I have all that headroom of shooting in 4K. So it's a really valuable trick. And, with a run and gun camera, like the setup that I showed you with the rig, it's very difficult to sort of step in to do that zoom, and you might not want to do it. So it gives you the flexibility of sometimes I will do it, sometimes I won't do it. I've got the headroom to be able to do it if I want. So just a really good tip. And if you want to adjust your phone, you can go into settings under camera and you can set the resolution there in the settings for your iPhone if you use an iPhone. So here's another thing that you can do with contemporary smartphones like iPhone 13, iPhone 14, some of the Android like the S22 and the Pixel 6 on the Android side, is you can do shoot in what's called cinematic mode. And cinematic mode is really powerful because, and it's a bit counterintuitive if you haven't used it, but it's kind of amazing. So I mentioned before that you can, in cinematic mode or portrait mode, if you're shooting stills, the background goes out of focus. It's like you're shooting at f1.8 or f2 if you're shooting on a still camera. And what's cool about that in cinematic mode is, yes, the background's out of focus, but also you can, in post-production, control the focus, which is kind of wild. But let me show you. Again, this is a really exaggerated example, but it will show you how powerful this is. So the one on the left is Linda speaking. And you'll notice she's sharp throughout the interview and the background's out of focus. Then on the one on the right, I deliberately take her in and out of focus in post-production. So let me show you that. So Linda, Narwhal, in conjunction with Torstar, did an investigation that showed that across Ontario in the Greenbelt, a lot of developers are going to be profiting from Ford, and that they've invested in those lands fairly recently. And there's a lot of questions being raised about how they knew what to invest in. Do you think that there should be some kind of investigation into the government about... Okay, so that's all sharp. Now watch. So Linda, Narwhal, in conjunction with Torstar, did an investigation that showed that across Ontario in the Greenbelt, a lot of developers are going to be profiting from Ford, and that they've invested in those lands fairly recently. And there's a lot of questions being raised about how they knew what to invest in. Do you think that... So that allows us to do, just let me go back. That allows you to do some really interesting stuff in post-production. So if two people were talking, I could actually cut focus between the two of them in post-production. I wouldn't have had to worry about that in the moment. I could do it later. So it's kind of astonishing that you can actually do that with a smartphone. Now I want to talk about audio, and this is sort of, if nothing comes out of this for you about this session at all, this is the main message. Do not outdoors, do not shoot video with your smartphone without an external microphone. You have to put an external microphone on your smartphone. Yes, the camera or the phone has a really good microphone if you're talking on the phone. It has a good microphone if you're shooting indoors and close. It does not have a good microphone if you're shooting at a distance and it's outside and it's windy. It will produce terrible, terrible audio. So here's an example. And again, God love the person that shot this video, but it is useless.
We don't understand why you are beholden to developers, to wealthy land speculators, to real estate agents. You know why? Because you are beholden to us.
So that, from extending the message and getting the message out there, that is entirely useless because the audio is no good. And it could have been better, way better, if there had been an external microphone attached to that smartphone. So, there's no point in shooting video like this because you're too far away from the subject for the microphone to pick up the audio properly. And it's way too windy. The wind is like it's somebody blowing over a Coke bottle top, right? It's just terrible. So it's just, don't do this, right? Like, you're just going to end up with useless footage because nobody can understand what that person was saying, right? It's just absolutely unusable. So to correct that, you really need to use an external microphone. And there are a variety of microphones you can use. I prefer for the run and gun stuff that I use a shotgun microphone, but you can also use a handheld microphone like you'll see the CHCH folks doing, or a wireless microphone, or a lapel mic, or even an iPhone. And I'll talk to you about that in a bit. But you need to get the mic as close as possible to the subject. That sometimes means you need to step forward. It means sometimes you need to place the microphone in front of somebody, or it means that you need to use a shotgun mic that is sort of like a telephoto lens for audio, right? So this is the lens that I really, or the microphone I really like. It's a shotgun. This gathers sound from in front of the microphone much more than behind, and it, as I said, it sort of acts as a bit of a telephoto lens. It pulls the audio in, it feels like anyway, so that you get way better quality audio than if you were shooting just with the smartphone itself. And it plugs into the lightning port of an iPhone, or older phones, you might want to plug it into the headphone jack. And it really does a great job. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like. So here it is here. And it is, there we go. Whoops, let me go back again. It's just, that's the front of the microphone, and it just plugs in with this little cable here into the actual phone. So it's super valuable to have. They're not that expensive, but it's really important. Nothing to do with shooting audio with your smartphone, but certainly important with rallies is, and I've seen this at rallies, like make sure your PA mic works. I've been at a couple of rallies where it cuts in and out, doesn't work at all. So then no matter what you've got in terms of the microphone on your smartphone, it's useless because the PA doesn't work, right? And so you need to really test that ahead of time to make sure you've got a functioning PA system. We also don't want to have any background music. There's some rallies I've been at have music, which is great. It's really fun for pumping up the crowd. Terrible for wanting to record interviews because it's too loud. And if you've got it going while people are trying to talk and stuff, it just doesn't really work that well, right? And it's really important to, if you're going to have a speaker, if you're going to take the time for people to listen to that person, they need to be trained how to use the microphone or bullhorn effectively, and not just hold it off to the side this way or down here and stuff, because it's a tool that only works really, it's like any microphone. The closer you get it to your mouth, the better it works. So make sure that you've got people that can actually use it effectively, right? I want to talk a little bit about music. You can add music to your video, and it's really easy to get royalty-free clips from a variety of sources, and it can really accent some of your video. Just maybe at the beginning or end, that's what I do with my rally videos, is I just got a little piece of music that I built myself in GarageBand. This is another music source, Audio Jungle, where you can get clips. The GarageBand is just a really great way to put together, you can put together stuff yourself, even if you're not musical. You can just grab clips and put them together yourself and do really nice intros and extras. So that was one that I did for the video I did on Strathcona Market. The other thing about music is, if you're going to use music in your video, you need to get, unless you're buying royalty-free stuff, you need to get permission, because it's the fair thing to do, but also because it can kill your video on YouTube. Like if I had, joking here with that song, who's Roberta Flack, is it? Yes. Song, that if that had been playing while I was interviewing folks in the Strathcona Market, because I do have music playing there, one, it would have been distracting, and two, it would have gotten pulled down from YouTube, because people say, look, you didn't ask Roberta Flack permission or Roberta Flack's record label to use that. You can't use that. You're going to get a copyright infringement notice, and your video is going to be shut down, if you keep doing that, right? So you really need, and that's the case, I just asked them, hey, I'm just doing some interviews. Could you mind if you, for now, could you turn the music off? And they did, and it worked out great, right? But you really need to be mindful of that. So I was really lucky at a couple of the rallies where there was music playing that I had to go away from the music to interview people, and you could hear it in the background, but it wasn't loud enough to sort of trigger and wasn't long enough to trigger a copyright infringement. But it's sort of a danger zone, right? So you got to be really aware that you get that. And if you're shooting not in a public place, people are fair game. If they don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy, you can shoot people at a rally, people speaking at a rally, you don't need permission. But if you're in a non-public place, you need to make sure you get their permission to be featured in the video. But again, not on the street. Like, you don't need that at all on the street. And that your music is all licensed. So I just want to talk a little bit about the audio mix. You want to have a combination of, or not necessarily for rally videos, but if you're interviewing somebody, you're going to have audio from the main content. You're going to have audio potentially from the B-roll content, sometimes no audio from the B-roll content. You're going to have room tone or maybe sound effects, like maybe you want to have the sound of a cash register that in the background or something, just to add some ambience to it. You've got to build that into it. And then music underneath all that. So there's layers of sound that you can build in, or you don't have to do that. But once you get used to doing that, so you can actually build up really introduce a sort of a sonic soundscape into your video that's going to be very powerful. So now let's talk about lighting. I really like using a variety of lighting. And this is my favorite. I'm just going to show you light that I use for videos, because it's really, I'm just going to turn it on. It's really bright and inexpensive and lightweight, and the battery lasts a long time. So it's super powerful. It's really important that you light people well. You don't want a video like this one here where it looks like the guy's in the witness protection program, and you've seen lots of people in Zoom calls that you think, like, I'm really sorry that you saw a mafia murder and now you have to live in Venezuela, but light yourself. It's really important to light well, and there's inexpensive LED lights like the one I just showed you that can allow you to do that. I'm using one right now for shooting, and it's not, I can't remember how much I paid for it. It's like under $70 or so. So it's really super important that you light well. And there's other things that you can do to light well. Like this, for example, is a backing that came with a package of smoked mackerel, I think it was. And it just happens to be silver on one side and shiny gold on the other. And if you just hold that in front of somebody's face, it can make, or beside somebody's face, it can make all the difference. You don't need to have special lighting. You just use available light and just reflect the sun coming through a window, and it's called fill light. And it's just super easy. And there's circular reflectors that you can get as well. I also like using that light I just showed you when I was doing the rally videos, because it introduces a couple of really important things. So this is a shot of one of the guys that I shot at the rally, at one of the rallies. And you'll notice that his face is nicely lit. And I used the light on my run and gun rig here. And again, it separates him from the background just a little bit. So he's a little bit warmer than the background, a little bit different lighting. But more importantly, he has what are called catch lights or specular highlights in his eyes. So you can see right there in his eyes. They wouldn't be there if I hadn't used that light. And so that light is sort of like a chef's kiss, right? Like, it's just a nice little touch that fills light in on somebody's face and just adds that little catch light that puts life into people's eyes. It makes them look more alive and more engaging. So if they're saying something, people are going to pay attention more because their eyes are alive. So it's really important that you use a light like that. It's really helpful. So you can also make sure that you pay attention to existing lighting, or available lighting, it's called. So in the case of the Strathcona Market shoot that I did, I've got light coming from two external windows that I shot the two subjects in different locations, so that you could, again, contextualize the store by shooting in two different locations, but similar lighting and similar differentiation in color temperature between the foreground and the background here. Now, I just want to, we're almost wrapped up, but I just want to talk a little bit about post-production. So I like using, for the rally videos that I've done, I really like using iMovie. It's a very simple program on the Mac. You could use Premiere on the Windows side. LumaFusion is really great on the iPad. Final Cut Pro is a very professional tool. I don't use that much unless I was shooting a longer documentary, then I would certainly use Final Cut, but iMovie is super powerful and relatively easy to use. There's other really quick tools like Clips that's available. DaVinci Resolve is another high-end program that's just become almost full capability on the iPad just the last couple of weeks. So there's all sorts of ways that you can edit video. iMovie is by far the easiest I find. And this is what an iMovie edit looks like. So that's all my B-roll from the Strathcona market. You can see that opening shot with the woman opening the door that I showed you, with the music that I played you sitting underneath there. It fades to me being in the market, sort of talking about the market. And up there, you can see as I'm talking, the B-roll, it cuts to the corn there and then on the street where it's located. It's of how to put the video together. And it's very visual. It's actually quite fun and it's very fast. You can just bang this stuff out really quickly. Again, you can see all your B-roll right there. Like you don't have to log your B-roll. You can see the B-roll that you've got there and you can decide what to use and how much of it to use. So the process for editing video is pretty straightforward. You sort of cull your, I'm just going to get a drink of water here, cull your video, crop the portions of it. So culling is when the B-roll you want to use. Pick how much of the B-roll you actually want to use. Compose your piece together, like put all the clips where you want them. Correct any, amplify some audio, clean up audio a little bit. Color grade, like make sure the color matches. And again, that's a relatively easy thing to do in iMovie, and then publish it out. And you want to publish it out to a variety of places. You could publish it to YouTube, you could publish it to Twitter, to Instagram, and each of them have their own sort of flavor of video that they like. YouTube is generally it can be longer pieces. By longer, I mean, anything up to an hour, but when I'm longer, I'm talking like 3 to 5 minutes. Whereas things like Instagram or TikTok are much shorter. So I don't know, some of you may have seen the Hey Doug Ford video that I shot interviewing people, and it was, I don't know, 2.5 minutes long. So if I was doing that on TikTok, I would edit it very differently. So let me show you. I just had some fun with it, and I'll show you what I mean.
Hey, Doug Ford. Hey, Doug Ford. Hey, Doug Ford. Hey, Doug Ford.
Hey, Doug Ford.
Hey, Doug Ford.
Hey, Doug Ford. Hey, Doug Ford. Hey, Doug Ford. Hey, Doug Ford. Hey, Doug Ford. Hey, Doug Ford.
Hey, Doug Ford. You got
Hey, Doug Ford. Hands off our green belts. Hey, Doug Ford. Just stop.
Right. So much shorter, right? And just sort of a fun, quick little hit, right? Again, finally, I want to talk a little bit about archiving it. Like once you've got the video done, make sure that you save it to more than one place. Like if you want to save it on your hard drive, on your computer, great, but also externally and maybe to the cloud, like an iCloud storage or Backblaze or some other offsite storage medium, right? And decide what you want to save. You may not want to save all your clips. You may just say, I'm kind of done with that. I'll get rid of all the clips. I just want the final product, or you might want to save it all. I'm not going to go through this in exhaustive detail. And this is just sort of the final workflow of thinking about video. Is this right medium for your video? Whose story is it? You want to scout your location, shoot using a tripod, composing well, using light well, getting audio well. Good, so you get good quality stuff coming in. Cull your bad clips, do all your post-production, including color grading, publish it to where you want it to go, and then archive it. And that's sort of the general workflow here. And one of the final things I want to touch on, which is really important for your organizations. If you want to produce stuff that you can turn around in 3 hours, you cannot then have a committee process that takes 3 weeks. Right? You have to give the person shooting the permission to post, because you've completely wasted your time shooting quickly and efficiently and getting your story out while the story's hot, while the event's still, fresh in people's mind. If you then have to send it to a committee who has to send it to another committee who has partners that it's got to, all of that stuff, then you just wasted the opportunity to get it out fast. You've got to give people permission to publish, right? You've got to get pre-release from people. Say, okay, look, I trust this person. They're going to make it, Jennifer's going to go out there and shoot, and in 3 hours we'll have the video up. That would be super great. But if you get bogged down in anything, the slightest thing that holds you up, completely wastes the point of doing any of this, because you can't do it in a timely manner. So, really think about that. I think it's really, really important. So just to summarize, we talked about great as the enemy of good. We talked about the basics of using your smartphone, respecting it, what's important about story, why going to a location at particular times is valuable, and how to figure out what those times are, what B-roll is, and how to shoot intelligent B-roll and make the best use of your time in the field. And a little bit about tips and gears for shooting the main footage, and what footage quality you should use, 4K, not 1080p. How important recording good quality audio is, and using an external microphone. If you're shooting outside, use an external microphone. How you can use lighting, inexpensive lighting, reflectors to get the best lighting so that people aren't in the witness protection program. A little bit about workflow and where to publish to and when. And then we just did a summary, which I just did now. So now I am happy to take any questions that you might have. So there we go. Okay, I'm happy to take any questions if people have any. Anybody have any questions?
Hi, Wayne. Thanks so much for the presentation. That was really helpful. So if somebody was in need of buying a new phone, an iPhone, what type would you recommend?
I really like the latest one, the iPhone 14, but the 13 and the 12 are also good. They're all good, and you can get an Android phone as well. I'm not, I like iPhones, and if I was suggesting what people should buy, I would say get an iPhone. That's the latest one you can afford, because the increases in the ability of the camera there's noticeable improvement, especially around video. It's the iPhone 13 and 14 that have the cinematic mode or cinematographic mode, and I think that's super important for producing really good video.
Okay. Thank you.
Somebody wanted to see my rig again, right? So there it is. With the camera's not in there as well as it could be, but there we go. Yeah, so that's what it looks like, with the microphone on top and the wooden handle, and then you just hold it and shoot. And I can see obviously the footage going in on the other side here. Yeah, and I really like that Rhodes mic. There's other ones you can get, Japanese or Chinese knockoff or microphones from Amazon, but I really like the Rhodes quality stuff. And there's others, Sennheiser and others. And again, it's worth spending the money on some stuff that's really good quality, right? Somebody's asking about captioning. You can do captioning. You can have Amazon, or not Amazon, sort of YouTube do its own captioning, but I wouldn't suggest you do that for stuff that's got a bit of noise, because if there's noise, wind noise and stuff, it will make the captioning more humorous than useful, really. So you can do your own captioning, and you can do it in the YouTube Studio. Allows you to do a transcription and add it in if you want to have CC captioning after the fact or during the time you're producing it. But if you're trying to get the video quickly, that's going to slow you down. So you might want to get it out without captioning first, and then go back and add the captioning later, I would suggest.
Can you give us an advice on the fastest and most efficient way to caption?
Of which? It depends on, I mean, there's really great tools that are online now. My mind's blanking on the name of the Otter is the one I'm thinking about. There's a tool called Otter that will automatically, you can feed it a video or audio file and it will do transcription for you. You generally have to do some cleanup on it, but it's ungodly good. And then you would take that and take it into YouTube Studio and time it. You can add it along as a track in your video and it will automatically sync it up with what's being said. It's pretty amazing how well it works. But that's what I would, if you have a lot of video that you want to caption, I would take it through a tool like otter.ai, I think is the website. And it really is a great way to do captioning of longer video quickly.
I use iPad, Final Cut Pro, and I burned my captions in. I'm trying to learn to do it the proper way, and that just took me forever. So that you have you can either burn your captions in, or you can have YouTube put them in, but they're kind of cheesy looking, the YouTube ones.
Well, they are relative to what you could, again, it's what you want to do quickly, right? You can do the sort of all singing, all dancing, fabulous looking stuff, but it's going to take you longer, right? And the point of this webinar is not to produce avatar, but to produce something that is really quick and dirty, and get you to get the stuff out quickly, because I think there's tremendous value if you have a rally. There's tremendous value in getting that out quickly, because people will be inclined to share it with the relatives and say, oh, look at me, I was in the rally, look, there I am. Or very useful for press that wasn't there to be able to see it quickly and think, wow, that looks like something I really should give them a call about, right? So there's real advantage to turning it around quickly and getting it out there, because that's when it's going to spread the quickest. If you get it out 3 days after the rally, people say, oh, I don't care, like I saw that, or I don't really care. But if you get it, like it's got a wow factor to it to say, wow, that just happened. Like, how did that get up so quickly, right?
Yeah, okay.
Verna or Jim?
It's Verna here, and thank you for an excellent webinar. Lots and lots of information. I am confused about your B-roll. Is that an Apple product, or I'm not sure where you get that?
What I meant, sorry, maybe I wasn't clear. The B-roll is simply the term for footage that you shoot that isn't part of the main, in the case of an interview, the main interview. It's simply stuff video footage that you shoot at an event that isn't the main event, that isn't the main person talking to the camera, right? So you shoot it yourself. It's the same footage as all the other footage you've shot. It's just called B-roll because it's not central to the storyline. It's an additional way of adding context or sense of place, right?
Right. Excellent. Thank you. And also for the tip about using the reflectors. I've got 2 of them sitting on my desk, and there they are. Something to use them for. Thanks ever so much.
Yeah, and I mean, again, there's some things you can do really inexpensively. Like, I'm sure many of you have those reflectors that you put in the front window of your car so that it doesn't, bake your dog or whatever. And those things are really cheap at Canadian Tire, but they're perfectly good reflectors, and nice big ones, right? So if you were shooting an interview and you could have an assistant that somebody came along with you and hold that to one side to fill light on somebody's face, then you spent, like, I don't know, $9 at Canadian Tire, and you've got a perfectly good reflector, right? Somebody's asking about a longer hands-on workshop. I haven't talked to the folks here about this. This is just something I did as a volunteer thing to try to be helpful. So we can maybe talk about that. I'm glad that this short one was useful for you. At least got you thinking about how to do the stuff that you're shooting better, particularly, again, I can't stress it enough, the external microphone. You got to get an external microphone. Yes, this is going to be recorded. So it's going to, I think when the link to the document that shows all the equipment that I mentioned, that's also going to have a link to the actual recording of this as well. Any other questions?
That was really complete. Oh, one thing you were talking about, you were giving the resolutions for YouTube. You gave us a screenshot of the resolutions for Instagram, YouTube, etc. I didn't catch all of that. Is that on the sheet that's coming at the end?
No, I can send that to you if you want. I mean, if you shoot 1080p, you're pretty safe, and I don't want to get too technical, but resolution isn't the only thing. There's compression. So Instagram, for example, compresses the holy hell out of images. So you could actually get a way worse looking image on Instagram than you would on YouTube or Vimeo or some other product because of the way the actual image is compressed. But 1080p generally is a sort of a safe thing to aim for, and that gives you the most bang for your buck, I think.
And is there any extra little tips you can give us on if we want to get really brave and do something funny on TikTok or something like that?
I'm too old for that. You got to talk to somebody who's 17 years old. I think that what you really want to try to do is have fun. And I would say this, whether it's TikTok or Snapchat or whatever, is don't take yourself too seriously, because it's just from a communications point of view, it can just be death, right? Like it's just so. Like I listen to some of the rally speeches and I just think, oh, come on, like I'm freezing here. Like what? Like stop going on about this. Like there's no sense of fun. And so I think with any video that you shoot or anything that you do, try to find some little piece of fun. Like in one of the rally videos, I was asking people, I said, if Donna Skelly was here, we were at the rally at Donna Skelly's office. If Donna Skelly was here, what would you say to her? And there was a couple of dogs there. So I asked the dogs, right? So there's just a little clip of the dog responding, right? And it's that you just got to find little bits of humor that you can inject into stuff so that it just it's just not so deadly serious, right? Anything else, folks?
That was a really great presentation. I really learned a lot.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad it was helpful to you. Yeah.
Oh,
we just got such. Oh, sorry.
Somebody asked something in the comments about sending things out, collaborating and augmenting what we do. Did you have any thoughts?
I was looking at a product. I do some work with rabble.ca, which is a progressive news site in Canada. And I'm just looking now at a tool that is pretty interesting that allows you to create let's take the Hey Doug Ford thing for an example. You could say, put a video sort of donut together with an intro that says, Hey Doug Ford, and then there's sort of blanks in the interface. And you can send a note to people and saying, hey, I want to create this video. All you have to do is upload a 10-second clip saying what you would say to Doug Ford, and then they can be uploaded and you put together collaboratively their video. And more interestingly, if you say had 20 clips of 20 people saying that, each of those people and other people could come into the site and say, I want to make a Hey Doug Ford thing, but I want this clip, this clip, this clip, this clip, and my own, and put that out. And then somebody else could take other people and put it out. So it's a really interesting collaborative tool. I'm just looking at the interface now, and I don't think it's public yet, but it's a very interesting tool for groups. So that's one possibility for doing that kind of collaborative work for sure.
Can you give us the name for when it comes out?
Yeah, I don't have it right now, and it's like a very it's like YAJJQ1 or something. It's quite odd right now, so I don't know what the final name is going to be. But it's interesting. I don't know. I don't want to recommend it yet because I haven't sort of tested it enough. But I think it's got interesting possibilities. There's other ways of collaborating. There's other tools online for doing collaborative video and skills. One of the interesting ones that's coming out now on the Mac side and the iPad side is Freeform, which is in iOS 16.2. It's an interactive whiteboard that would allow you to put up everybody could put up video clips, and then you could sort of brainstorm how the video should go together, and then one person would produce it. Not super collaborative in the sense of actually the editing process, but interesting in terms of storyboarding and stuff, which I think is a really interesting tool. But if I like the end product that I'm looking at now, I'll let people know about it. But my jury's still out on it. I'm just not sure whether it's going to work or not. Anything else, folks? Okay, I'm going to call it a day. Okay. Rachel, do you want to wrap it up and we'll...
Yeah, thank you everyone so much for coming out. That was an excellent webinar, and we will be sending out a gear list and a recording of both this webinar and the webinar that Wayne did about 6 weeks ago. So yeah, thank you guys all so much for coming out, and take care.
Okay, thank you. See you later.